Join the conversation with Tommy Weber. Pro and college baseball coach Tommy Weber brings you cutting-edge interviews and thought-provoking commentary in a weekly podcast dedicated to baseball, sports, current events, and the world. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and TommyWeberBaseball.com. And make sure to follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Tommy Weber Baseball. It's time to get the conversation started, so here's your host, Tommy Weber.
And it's from the Bolt Studio on the Staten Island campus of St. John's University, produced by our talented team of sport management undergrads. I'm Tommy Weber, and this is The Conversation, bringing you some insights, perspective, and, of course, lots of opinions on our baseball and sports culture. Today, very special guest, Mike Massey, University of Illinois graduate, Gold Glove winner, the most distinguished award you can get in college baseball because they only give out 9 of them. Taken in the 4th round in 2019 by the Kansas City Royals. This year, 2022, after a couple of stops in Arkansas and Omaha on July 15th, got the call up to the big leagues. Michael and I met in 2018, did a lot of work together, sort of saw things kind of similarly, and gravitated towards each other and had a lot of really, really fruitful work that we got done. And we've remained close and friends ever since. We talk a lot. We text a lot. And it's great to finally have an opportunity to get to do a little deep dive into the game and where Michael's at. Welcome aboard, Mike Massey.
Tommy, thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
My pleasure. So, when I thought about if I had to describe Mike Massey as a player, the first thought that came to mind was really, really high baseball IQ. And I don't mean baseball IQ because skillfully or physically you're not extremely talented and high-end. What I mean is that I think the thing that stood out to me immediately when we met was just the manner in which you carried yourself, how desirous you were of wanting to experience and learn the game at a very elite level. You always had your eye on the prize, very, very focused. I think a lot of that, having met your father, comes from your upbringing. But in a day and age where that is so rare, I think that was something that really stood out to me in the beginning. Speak to us briefly about how you got so laser focused and so attentive to the real details that matter in the game.
Yeah, I think, I think obviously, like you mentioned, my dad being my coach kind of growing up my entire life was, was something that kind of started that. I remember when I was 10 years old, we'd be going over, relays and cuts, and he'd be preparing, sheets at work to bring to practice later that night. And he'd send them to me, and I'd be studying them before the practice, and we'd be talking about, hey, if the ball's hitting the left center gap, where does the shortstop go? Where's the second baseman go? And, we're talking about double cuts at 10 years old. So I think just kind of always having that edge as my dad being a coach. And, you focus on those finer details of the game, I think, a little bit more. And then, I had an older brother, Andrew, who's 3 years older than me. So I think always being pushed a little bit, as a younger brother, and you're playing up all the time. And I got really used to not being the most talented guy in the field when you're playing with a bunch of guys that are 3-4 years older than you. And so the only way to not lose is you got to find those margins. You're not going to beat guys that are older than you, especially at that age when you're extremely underdeveloped. There's a big difference between a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old. So trying to find those margins and ways to beat those guys was something that helped me. And being from the Chicago area, I grew up with a lot of guys. It was a very competitive baseball area. There's a lot of guys who went on to play, Division I college baseball and on to pro ball and into the big leagues. And so it was something for me that always motivated me when you talk about that passion and that desire. And it was something that I saw firsthand. I saw guys do it that I knew. I saw guys do it that I trained with. And so, it just seemed like it was always something that was possible. It never seemed like it was this far off dream. And, all I had to do was just put in the work and and have the right guidance from guys like my dad, my brother, coaches like you. So, that's pretty much it right there.
Yeah, I like to use the expression the coachless player, and that was you. Although you were always ready to work, willing to work, and certainly put in lots of work. You were a guy that I could trust. You send them out there, and you know that Mike probably could manage the team. Like my favorite players and the guys who I think are really the most valuable are the guys who know where everyone is, where everyone should be, and essentially could be managers on the field. And you certainly fit that description. And I just wonder sometimes, although obviously the big league experience is very different, how much do you find yourself doing what I call looking around? Just making sure guys are in the right spot, anticipating if the ball gets hit down the left field line, what am I going to do if the ball gets popped into right? How much of that do you do consciously during a game?
A lot more now in pro ball with the shift. I'm constantly looking around because there's so many guys that are, the third baseman's playing shortstop, the shortstop's over on the second base side. So now you really have to know um, if there's a ball hitting right center. Like as a second baseman, I'm not going out anymore if we're in a left-handed shift. That's the shortstop. Um, or a ball down the left field line in a left-handed shift. There is no more double cut because the second baseman's not. He's going to have to run a mile to get over there to the left line. So definitely a lot more now with the shift. It'll be interesting next year how that plays out when they take away the shift. Because to me, like at this point in my career, it's almost natural instinct. It's like, I was talking about this with somebody from the Royals actually about how scripted the game is at the big league level. There's a ball down the left field line, it's a double. There's a ball in the left field gap, it's a double. There's a ground ball hit into left field, it's a base hit. Like there's not many things that come up in a big league game that surprise you anymore. Just because so many guys, I saw you were talking about like the Josh Donaldson thing. I mean, I feel like that's guys just don't run anymore. Like it's just they accept almost what the game gives them because you play so much that they're like, oh, I've hit this ball a million times, that's going to be a homer, so I don't need to run. Or I've hit this ball in the gap 100 times this year, that's going to be a double. And so even if the guy bobbles it, they're just not running hard enough to take that extra base for the most part. And so the game has become extremely scripted. Um, to where you see something and it's almost like your body just automatically takes you there. Um, so again,
Well, it's funny you say that because as a kid, we used to play stickball, and if you didn't have enough kids, you played automatics. If I hit it off the top of the roof, it was a double. If I hit it over the roof, it was a home run, that kind of thing. And that is essentially what has happened. And I think another contributory factor to that is the shrinking of the ballparks. The ballparks now are much smaller. So in reality, the triple is almost out of play unless the ball gets hit over a center fielder's head. He gets too close to the wall. The ball gets past him. By the time the right fielder gets there or left fielder gets there, you could go to third base. So I think sometimes the players get a bad rap. The reality is a lot of times running hard doesn't make a difference because there's just not a possibility of you gaining an extra base. We could, obviously, when the ball's hit on the ground in the hole or something like that, or you're in the playoffs and you see the finish line, you'd like to think that guys are going to leave nothing to chance. But I think the shrinking of the ballpark has had a lot to do with that.
no, I agree. I think it's something that, at least as I've learned in my career, I've had some injuries that have kept me out, with my back, and I've learned to manage my workload, I think, a little bit better. And I think there's a time and a place. I think you got to understand. This goes kind of back to that baseball IQ. You have to understand as a player when you take your chance and when you conserve. And so if it's game 57 and we're down 8-1 or we're up 8-1 in the eighth inning, and I hit a two hopper to the second baseman, probably not going to try to go 100% down the line, and it may piss somebody off that is watching the game and they think I'm not hustling or whatever. But the reality is, when you do it 162 nights a year, um, you can't sprint down that line every night because it just doesn't make sense. And, you forget about how many times you jog out to your position, how long you're on your feet. And so if that ball's 3 steps to his right and he's got to maybe make a backhand play. Yeah. And I can kind of smell the hit. I think there's a reason to go there. Now, again, in a playoff situation, all that goes out the window. When you're in the playoffs and everything's on the line, you hit a ground ball back to the pitcher, I think you're putting pressure on him, you're going. And just because I think it's tougher to play defense in those situations, and nothing is automatic in a playoff situation. With the pressure and the you want to put as much pressure on that guy as possible. So I saw the other day I was watching the Phillies and the Padres, and Profar like broke his bat and flipped something to second, and I'm trying to think who was playing second for the Phillies, because he just caught it and like almost like nonchalantly like was about to throw it over there, and he saw Profar getting down the line, and he had to put something on it to get him, and you could just tell like if he bobbled that ball, if that ball rattled in his glove, base hit. Um, so in that situation, that makes sense. But you could tell how used to just being able to nonchalant catch it, throw it over there that the second baseman from the Phillies was, because that's what happens all year. Guy hits that ball and he runs 70% down the line because he knows he's out, and you can afford to do that. Um,
Right, that guy's participating in the game the same way you are. Well, once that guy decides I'm going to bust it, you could have now the element of surprise. You make a bad throw. It's a guy on first base, nobody out. That could change the outcome of a game, especially when the games matter the most, which is in October.
well, there was 4 hits the other night in that game, so it's like you're not going to win based on hitting alone. Like you have to hope for an error. You got to hope a guy sails one into the stands and you get an extra 90 feet. Like, and that's what I think is so funny about the game today is it's during the regular season there's such an emphasis placed on the new school, the new era. We're going to drive the 3-run homer. We're going to put the ball in the gap. We're not going to bunt. We're not going to steal. Um, and then in the playoffs, you kind of see that small ball game, and I think there's this big disconnect between like, oh well, which way does baseball need to go? And in my mind, I'm like, why can't we do both? Why can't the 3-run homer be a part of the game? But also, if the third baseman's playing back, why can't you drop a bunt down? If there's a runner on second and you have Jose Ramirez up with nobody out, why can't he hit? If the number 8 hitter's up, why can't you bunt him over? Like, I think sometimes people get caught up and it has to be all or nothing. It's got to be this new school, we're going to hit the 3-run homer, or it has to go back to the old school, we're going to bunt, steal, run. It's like, why can't we just meet in the middle and just play the game? Whatever the situation calls for, understand yourself as a player, understand maybe if this is a good matchup for you, who's hitting behind you, um, and take all those things into account and then make the decision based on that stuff.
And I'm sure your father would concur on this. I would say there is no old school because the 3-run homer was very prevalent 40 years ago. Earl Weaver, the famous manager of the Baltimore Orioles, played for the 3-run homer. You played for the big inning, except you were willing to set up that big inning. The 3-run homer has now become 3 straight home runs, 3 straight solo home runs we play for. The difference between then and now is that those guys wanted to set up the home run by getting a walk, getting a single, getting a guy on, and then your power hitter comes up and drives them in with the 3-run home run. So nothing is really new. All the great tunes have already been written. We've done everything. The delivery mechanism may be different. How we come to these conclusions may be different. But what I think you're trying to say, if I may, is that we've created this conflict where there shouldn't be any. There shouldn't be 2 schools of thought because they really are one school of thought. It's basically we got to score as many runs as we possibly can. So why wouldn't you want to be able to pick from any part of the menu rather than relegating yourself to just one option?
That's exactly it. It's like, where can the name of the game score more runs than the other team? And so if you're going to give me something, it's like, well, like one of the things I actually hate the most, and this is kind of on topic, kind of not, but like I hate the unwritten rules of the game. I hate that, like the third baseman. So this happened a couple times this year where we'd be losing or winning by quite a bit, and the third baseman's the defense is gonna play a shift on me. So the third baseman's gonna go to shorts. Shortstop's gonna flip on the other side. Second baseman's playing at the fence and right field. Um, and I can't bunt. And if I bunt, someone's gonna get hit. And to me, I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, why can't so you're gonna take away part of my game because we're winning or losing by a lot. That's something that I do very well. So should a pitcher, if you're winning by 10 runs, can a pitcher not throw his curveball? Well, you got to take away something from your arsenal. You guys are up by so much. You can't. hey, the defense, we can defend against what you're going to do, and we could play our odds of where you're going to hit it, but you can't combat that. And I think it's such an interesting part of the game. It's like part of my as a player, part of my value is being able to bunt, being able to run, being able to situationally hit. And so if you take that away and you expect me to like, oh well, now I gotta hit 30 homers with the first baseman or the third baseman, like there's different parts to everybody's game that make them good. And I think a good team, like you watch the Phillies, like they won 87 games, but you can just tell that everybody knows their role. Everybody knows their role. And like you said, it's not like they don't have that disconnect. It's just we're trying to score runs. And whether that's a bunt, whether that's a steal, some guys might need to hit the ball in the second base with a runner on second to get them over because Bryce Harper's on deck. And it's like that's one thing when we played Cleveland that was really, really noticeable was how good and just how tight they were. Like they had their guy, they had Jose Ramirez, they had Josh Naylor, um, Gonzalez to drive in runs. But then they also, like you talked about, like they set up those big innings with if you made an error or you walked a guy, they were scoring. There was no way around it. Like they were just that elite in their ability to get a guy from the batter's box all the way around to touch on plate and score.
Yeah, essentially the game comes down to scoring every run you can and getting every out you can because you only get 27 outs. What you do with them, how covetous you are of your 27, and how stingy you are with giving them more than 27 is going to really say a lot about whether or not you can win or lose this game. And that hasn't changed. Until that changes, that's really the main concern. I'm glad you talked about your value because we spoke about this. We texted back and forth about this very issue, which I'm going to throw out there and have you comment on. So I think baseball, and again, I'm not one of these people who thinks baseball's in bad shape or baseball. It is. The game just keeps evolving and changing. It changed 100 years ago. It's going to change 100 years from now. But there are different challenges, and some changes are for the better, and some changes are for the worse. I think some of the safety concerns take away from the value of players, and here's what I mean. I believe that one of the separators in baseball is athleticism. And in a game that's becoming increasingly less athletic, less action, less need to move, the mandatory slide rule at second base, I believe, took away from baseball one of the single most athletic plays that you see a lot and used to see a lot in baseball, which is a savvy, athletic middle infielder, whether it be a shortstop or a second baseman, needing to listen to that internal clock, calculate a lot of different things in a very, very short period of time, and decide whether or not he's going to hold the ball, take the shore out, continue through with the pivot, make the double play, whatever. That is now gone. Gone. A guy basically stands at the bag, catches the ball, and throws the ball to first base without ever worrying about whether or not he's going to get taken out. Now, this in no way is advocating, blocking a guy, running through a guy, and sending him into left field. But a very artful play, an athletic play, is my ability to catch the ball from the second baseman, read the runner where he is, get up in the air, and make a throw to first base to complete the double play. That's now gone. And I believe that's part of what makes me valuable as a player, and the game has just unilaterally removed that.
No, I think that's hilarious because the funny part about that is like we were just talking about. You watch the playoffs. There's 4 hits, 3 hits, 2 hits, and so where do you're not finding the value on the offensive side of the ball. Like the value is on the mound, and the value is in your ability to efficiently, like you just said, get those 27 outs. And so if you have a guy at second base or shortstop who can steal an out for you, that is a tremendous advantage to the team that's just going to put the guy who can hit at second base or at third base even. Like just it's like I said, it's funny to me when you watch the playoffs how much the game is different. And I think a lot of people will deny it, but it's like you truly see it's like baseball is unfolded in the playoffs. You truly see what you need to value in order to win. Because you wouldn't when your back is against the wall and you need to win to stay alive, you truly you get guys playing a way of bunting, running, good defense, pitching changes, matchups, like, and you truly, it comes out. It's like it's your true emotion, it's your true self. It's like, well, we need to win, so we're gonna we have to turn this double play. I think the other day, um, in the Phillies game, maybe it was. I think the ninth inning, like you saw how much that inning changed as a defender. Like I think there was a ball hit the bone, maybe at shortstop, and kind of that play where like the throw took the shortstop in the shift a little bit off the base, and they end up dropping it. And that whole inning now is, instead of it being runner on first with 2 outs, that goes to first and second with 1 out. The amount of pressure, and I don't think sometimes people realize this, the amount of pressure that comes on a defender when there's runners in scoring position, because now you have to somewhat pay attention to that guy on second base, right? So now you got to hold him just a little bit, even if you're not like jockeying him, he's in your mind, which now draws you maybe a step or two out of position. And now a ball, a little broken bat single fault, like things just begin to open up when there's runners on base. And so having a guy at second base who can take away a base runner at first base with a nifty, with nifty footwork or a good throw, or even like you said, even hanging on to that ball and deciding to not throw it 10 rows in the stands. So now that guy goes to second and there's a runner on second. Those are plays that I think get overlooked. And one of the things that I'm really excited about next year is that shift going away, because I think for the same reason in the game, and especially for fans, that's going to open up some really fun plays. When you got the second baseman out in right field, there's really no more with a runner on first base. There is no more first to third on a ground ball single to right. Um, the game is so calculated now, where the pitchers are so good, and God forbid you do hit something hard, the other team knows exactly where you're going to hit it. So it's like the like you said, the triple is obsolete. First to thirds are obsolete. Diving plays for the most part are obsolete, because there's no, speaking of value, like when there's got to be 2 guys on each side of the base, think about how much more range now your middle infield is going to have. Think about what those guys are going to have to cover. You can't just, again, it's going to have to go back to the value of, can you read a swing? Because there's only 2 guys on each side of the field. So going back to the idea of, okay, I'm watching this guy versus our pitcher and I'm reading his swing, I might have to cheat and take 2 or 3 steps because I have to cover so much more ground now. So can I be able to, you're going to start seeing value in guys that can read swings. And I think
No doubt. I've always maintained that one of the most important things you could ever do is during batting practice, be at your position and predict where's that ball going to go? Where's he hitting this one before he hits it? You've got to be able to anticipation is one of the key ingredients in being a good defender, so that you arrive at a spot before the ball does. Well, the better you are at that, you're able to separate yourself from somebody who isn't, because and this is one of the advantages of advanced metrics, you're going to be able to calculate how many outs my range is responsible for as opposed to somebody else.
Right. And the shift takes that away.
Absolutely. It makes it a more ponderous, slower, unathletic game because guys have to move less. And the crazy play is gone. There are no more, even when you think about like double cutoffs and relay, it's very automatic. I agree. And the desperation of the playoffs tends to mitigate that a little bit, because now every run, you could feel it even as someone who watches the game. The guy's on first, nobody out. Well, now there's a high likelihood they could score that guy. They could bunt. He could steal a base. Now the catcher's got to be better at blocking balls. Pitcher's got to be a little more careful throwing the ball in the dirt. It opens up a whole, Pandora's box of possibilities that make the game far more exciting.
Exactly. That's like you see a runner on first base. I've seen guys in the playoffs with a runner on first, nobody out, sacrifice bunt him. Just because it shows the value of getting a runner in scoring position and what that does to a defense mentally, what it does to them, where it pulls them out of position. Now you got to hold that guy. And what would have been a routine ground ball to shortstop becomes a diving play that tips off his glove. And it's just, it really shows the value of getting guys closer to home plate. Get them closer to where they can score.
I think you make a great point about the real advantage of the shift going away, which is, I don't think people appreciate enough, because you see way too much emphasis on physical skills. whether it's social media or just everyone is so wrapped up in getting outputs. I don't think people understand and appreciate enough what goes on inside a middle infielder's head in a pressure-packed ball game, in a game that means something. When a guy gets on first, it's late in the game, the score is close, all the things that have to go through your head that you have to worry about, that in no way involve your physical skills. Speak to some of those things, because we've talked about this a lot, whether it be anticipating where the ball's going to get hit or anticipating something that's going to happen before it happens.
Yeah, no, I think that's again, when you get that runner on second as a second baseman, when there's a guy on second, even if he's not a steal threat, like we had times this year where I think Miguel Cabrera may have stolen third on us in a game, and it was just because it was that we fell asleep, and it was like he's like, all right, I'm going to take it. I'm going to take even in the situation didn't make sense at all. There was 2 outs in the inning. Like everything would tell him don't steal. But he did it, and he did it standing up. And so, like, there's things as an infielder, like, even if that guy's not a base stealing threat, you still have to think about him. You have to be in the neighborhood. You're making sure now you get that runner on second base as a middle infielder. You're looking at that base runner, making sure he's not signaling signs. Now your catcher and your pitcher have to start going through multiple sets of signs, which could lead to a cross up and a pass ball. And now that guy gets to third. And again, there's things like, okay, maybe this guy wants to shoot that hole between first and second because I'm overholding this guy on. So now it's like, what do I have to, in my head, each pitch, I have to run the probability and the importance of, like, is it more important for me to be closer to this guy so he doesn't get a good jump on a base hit or he doesn't get a walking steal? Or do I just shift back over and take away this base hit? And so each pitch is different. Maybe on an 0-2 count, maybe I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to let this guy maybe run if he wants to, but I need to get back over so this guy just doesn't get a cheap 0-2 hit and score that guy. But maybe earlier in the count, I'm like, well, I don't want to let this guy get to third because now he's got to fold it back here at third base for a pass ball, for a dirt ball, for an infield single, for something. So, like, there's just so many things that go into it. And the more that I think about it, the one that really is the big issue is the guy on second being able to relay signs, being able to look into the pitcher's glove and see a grip. Pitchers and catchers, like, pitchers are creatures of habit. And so now you got to start, the guy's out there in a pressure moment and he's having to, instead of just looking for the catcher and seeing a 1, he's got to chase the 2, add the 3. And in his head, he's like, I don't even know what pitch I'm throwing anymore. And he crosses up the catcher. And then you get an infield single and it's a run. And so those are things, again, they come out in playoff situations. You see the value, you see the importance. The amount of mound visits with a runner on second base in a playoff game goes dramatically up than it would in a regular season game. Just because of that stuff. They're changing it every 3 pitches. And you begin to
So then if I take your opinion about the shift and extrapolate that to the pitchers, then you would not be an advocate of PitchCom because, and this is why I'm not an advocate of PitchCom, I think it takes immense skill and pressure, which adds to the excitement of the game. And baseball is a game, unlike any other sport, what makes baseball great is that it provides suspense. Baseball will keep you on the edge of your seat. It's not an action game like the other sports are, but it's a very nerve-wracking game if you understand the game. It keeps you on the edge of your seat. And why I think PitchCom is a bad idea is that, well, now you don't have to hide the signs. Nobody, I've got you in my ear. The catcher has his hand over his shin guard, and you've now taken away one of the really great games inside the games that makes the game so attractive to those of us who have played, managed, coached, or whatever. That's what attracts us to the game. Is this pitcher rattled? Can he handle the pressure of having to change the signs again and having to go the pitcher and the catcher, that intimate relationship that they have, which makes the game really so suspenseful?
It makes it cookie cutter. It's like everyone, like, to me, in the argument is like, oh, well, it's going to save time. And I'm like, well, you're still hitting buttons and the guy still has to say yes or no. Like, I don't see how that saves time. So, like,
You're putting the pitch clock in, Mike. Mike, they're putting the pitch clock in anyway, right? They're putting the pitch clock in anyway. So what do you need PitchCom for? If it's not it isn't a time saver, and it's baseball's obsession with saving time. It's not how long the game takes. It's the pace of the game that matters. If you just picked up the pace, which if pitchers worked faster and were more decisive, you would have to spend less time hiding signs. If you just made up your mind a little quicker and got better at being more decisive as a pitcher and a catcher, working together throughout a season, getting to know each other better, strengths, weaknesses, hitters' strengths and weaknesses, you wouldn't need to worry about time because the pace would be picked up.
Right. Well, and I think, like you said, like it takes away value to some guys. Are the Aaron Judges of the world going to lose value? No, because Aaron Judge just hits the ball in the ballpark and he hits 300 and he's going to be a great player either way. But maybe for a guy like me, like one of my differences in becoming a good base runner is, okay, I'm on second base. I get my secondary lead. Well, you know what? I just saw the catcher and the second baseman make eye contact. I just picked it up because I'm focused. I'm locked into the game. I'm locked into what they're doing. I know the score. I know the situation. Not a bad time for them to try to backpick me here. So maybe I read that, and as soon as the pitch is thrown, I get a big secondary, and I know the catcher's coming up throwing, and as soon as he pops up to throw, I take off a third. And now he throws the ball to second, trying to backpick me, but because I was one step ahead of him, I'm standing on third base. And what you do is you take away when the catcher can just put it in the shortstop's ear saying, hey, we're going to backpick here. Well, there's really again, it's very cookie cutter. And you kind of take away those like little nuances like we talk about, like, man, like how do you be a good base runner? It's just everything's going to turn very standard. And like I said, the game's going to be it's going to be more scripted than it already is.
And I would submit that what it does is it makes the play, it diminishes the level of the player pool, because to the extent you're asking players to do less, you're not getting as good and complete a player. You're just not. It would be like telling somebody on the PGA Tour, well, after your first putt, the next putt is good. Well, then all of a sudden you wouldn't get as the PGA Tour quality player would go down because putting would be less valuable. Well, here's what you're saying is all of that stuff really doesn't have as much value, when in fact it is one of the great separators in the game and does have a lot of value unless you legislate it out of the game, which is what you did at second base with the pivot in the shortstop and second baseman, and what you've done now with PitchCom. And Max Scherzer is an ardent opponent to PitchCom because he says, I've built my entire career, I've studied how to conceal my signs. This is like an art form to me. And I thought that was a very articulate response to PitchCom.
Yeah, no, I agree. And like I said, I'm always a big, the whole, like in business, follow the money. In baseball, follow the playoffs. Follow what teams are doing in the playoffs, right. And that's going to show you those are the best players in the game right now. On winning teams. And those guys have something to offer fans. There's a reason why they're there. They're one of the best 10, 12 teams in the league. Like, it doesn't make the second baseman from the New York Yankees, it becomes no different than the second baseman from the worst team in the league if everything is cookie cutter. You don't get to see the difference. And now it's just like, okay, what team has Aaron Judge? Or what team has the Jacob deGrom? And that's, for the most part, going to win. But luckily, the playoffs have been the last thing to change, and they really haven't changed over the years. If you watch the playoffs every year, I'm sure for the last 50 years, it's the same. Like, the game is played with great intensity.
It feels the same.
Yeah, yes. It feels the same. But then you watch the regular season, and you can see, like, the game just feels different at times. But the playoffs, it's always the same. And to me, that's one of the things where you got to look at. And when everyone wants to bring all these data, analytics and all these stats in, it's like, it's funny because when it matters most, we don't really rely on that. We rely on instinct. We rely on your gut feel, on your baseball IQ, on your ability to pick up certain things within the game, read a swing. And when I watch a playoff game, I think that's clear as day.
Those thousands of hours that you've spent, many of them we were lucky to spend together, learning your craft. Learning everything about your craft, like soaking it all in, taking it all in. these kinds of things serve to diminish that effort, and you turn it into essentially a baseball combine, where it's just a matching of some physical skills, which don't really define a complete player. They just don't.
No, and I think it's funny you say that. Like one of the things that I think has come into the game a lot is like weightlifting, bigger, stronger, faster. Um, and I think it's funny because as I've gotten older, I used to be a big kind of right early in my pro career, late in my college career. I was like, man, I need to lift weights and I need to get bigger and stronger
Yeah,
and I need
yeah.
to look like the guys look like on TV. And as I've gotten older, I've actually began to lift weights less and less and less because to
I
me,
love
it's
it.
not special. It's not like it's not. If I want to go look at someone who's strong, I could go to any local gym, and you can see
Yep.
how easy it is to be strong. Like there's nothing that people see in that is like, wow, I want to turn on the TV because this guy's big and strong and he can hit a homer once every 20 at bats, 400 feet or whatever. Like people want to see skill. So now my off seasons are more like hand-eye coordination stuff. How many times can I hit a ball on my bat with one hand and keep going? Um, how many times can I throw a ping pong sized ball with my buddy and we throw it as high as we can and it moves moves around up there like a ball in the wind and you got to catch it with your bare hand. Like those are things that's skill. Like you can't go to a local gym and find two people to be able to catch that ball. I can go to a local gym and watch 100 guys bench press 300 pounds. And sometimes what I don't like is I don't
Brilliant.
like when the game tries to like when people try to make the game into something that's standard. Like it's not that easy. It's not a standard game. You can't just throw these things in there that are going to make it vanilla and very cookie cutter and everyone's going to be the same and everyone's going to follow these same rules. And you leave, like you said, you leave no room for skill, which is what actually makes the game. That's why people get on the edge of their seat. If you make it so
That's right.
scripted, it's like, oh, well,
That's
I know
right.
what's going to happen here. I know that guy's not going to be able to pick the sign. He's not going to get a good jump because he can't even know what pitch is coming. Um, he can't anticipate a dirt ball as much anymore because if you're able to steal the signs or pick up on the signs, that's how guys get such good jumps. And those margins are so close with how talented guys are. Like if you don't get that head start mentally, like you can't just react. You're going to get thrown out. Like the game's just too quick. Guys are too good. So it's like that's what
Yep.
makes guys special is that ability, like their talent paired with their ability to read the game and get good jumps. That's where you get guys who are really special in
No
my
doubt.
mind.
I tell young players, there's a reason why there's no fungos in the weight room, because you don't get better at baseball by going in the weight room. And guess what? If you spend enough time in the weight room, you're going to see results, which is why the weight room has become so popular, because you don't have to confront the fact that maybe my skill level really isn't that good. Because in the weight room, if you spend enough time and you lift enough weights, you will get results. If you're a 16-year-old kid and your body's growing, you're going to get results. So it's a great false positive that we've foisted upon the baseball community. And in reality, if you're not taking 6,000 fungos a day and playing wiffle ball with your friends and improvising and innovating and finding ways to be creative about how to do things, you're not becoming a better player. And I must say, as impressed I am with you as a person, you're so articulate in how you express in a very sober manner, without any ideology, the definition of what it takes to be a really good player. And I knew that immediately when we met, that you were a different kind of kid, and certainly you have proven to be so. But I have some. I want to shift gears because, as we said before, I could do 10 of these with you. And if you want to, you just tell me when you want to do one, and we'll just pick a topic and go, because there are 6,000 other topics that we could get to throughout the year. And this has been really great. But I have a couple of lighter questions to ask you really quick before you go. I know you're pressed for time, and so are we. These sport management majors get paid a lot of money to produce the podcast. So, best clubhouse food.
That's clubhouse food. You talking about what town or what food? Like what actual food?
Major League. What Major League team has the best clubhouse food? Forget about other than Kansas City. We're going to exempt
Okay,
Kansas City from
yeah,
one of these
that's fair.
questions.
I think the best clubhouse food was Toronto. So Vlad Jr.'s mom, I don't know,
Really?
Vlad Jr.'s grandma makes all the Latin food in for
Oh,
both teams, for the home
wow.
and the away team. So the food there was phenomenal.
Oh my God. So they put Vlad Jr.'s grandmother to work
Put her to work.
81 days a
Yeah,
year.
she makes all the Latin food.
Wow. Good for her. All right, Toronto. Toughest right-handed pitcher you faced?
Zach Gallen.
It doesn't have to be the best right-handed pitcher you faced.
Zach Gallen from Arizona.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah,
that's
nasty
a good one.
curveball.
What stands out the most?
His ability to tunnel. Everything looked like it was going to be a fastball, and it came out of his hand flat.
Same thing.
Some of them
Right.
would have that rise and stay up. Other ones, right when they got the home plate, would just tumble in the dirt. Could have thrown it to me 100 times. I would have swung it all.
Toughest lefty. Toughest lefty.
Toughest lefty. Soto, the closer for Detroit. There was like 101 power sinkers, nasty slider. He was good, but I will give an honorable mention to Rich Hill. You want to talk about like a guy who just knows the game and knows the ins and outs, and stuff-wise, nothing special anymore at 42 or 43 years old. But you really just see the value of a guy who can mess with your timing, sequence pitches, and he turned average stuff into he's still pitching in the big leagues.
Yeah, guys like that feel like they're a step ahead of you. Give me a player who surprised you. Wow, this guy's better than I thought. I didn't realize he was this good.
Andres Jimenez from Cleveland, second baseman. That can just
He's
hit,
good.
Man.
I like him a lot.
He can just hit, and I know he struggled.
I like him a lot.
He came over from New York in that Lindor trade and struggled a little bit in New York, but like watching him this year, it's just man. If there's
he moves good, that kid.
Yeah,
I love
just
him.
Really, that whole Cleveland team.
Yeah, I like. Yeah, and he strikes me as a kid who plays a very sober kind of game. He's not easily rattled. He seems to have a good approach, both on the field and at bat. I like him a lot. In the big leagues, what's easier than you thought it was going to be?
I would say playing. I thought the environments were going to be like. I thought like playing in front of 40,000 people or 30,000 people was going to make the game feel different. And it's interesting that when you're out there in that kind of environment, the game still feels like a game. Like it's not because when you go to a game, you feel the energy in the stadium. When you're playing in the game,
yes,
you're so focused on what you're doing.
You get immersed in what you're doing.
I thought that was going to be more of like it's cool, but I thought it was going to be something that was going to I was going to have to work through, and it really wasn't.
I think that speaks to your pedigree. I really do. What was harder than you thought it would be?
I think hitting. I really do. I think everyone always talks about like, oh, it's the same stuff. It's just it's the same stuff. You just got to get used to it up there. And I think guys are so much better at again, like we talked about, reading swings, sequencing their pitches. The stuff may be the same, which is what I think sometimes people say, but how they use that stuff. In the sequencing that they're able to pull out. I think I went 0 for 15 maybe one time in my minor league career. I was 0 for 15 3 times in 2 months. Like it adds up quick. There is no break. There's no like, hey, I'm going to get my knock today off of this guy. It's like I'm 0 for my last 12 and we got Zach Gallen today. So it's just there's no break.
Right. All right, last one. How reliant are you? Because one of my pet peeves about everyone, and this goes for every level of the game, even guys who aren't, don't have technology available to them. Nobody watches the game anymore. You got to watch the game. There's a lot to glean from just watching the game. How reliant are you on the tablet?
Not very. I go and not during the game. I will say that I don't like to watch it during the game. I will go back and watch it after because I think there's some things that I can pick up and learn.
Sure.
But I don't think you learn. Like before I have an at bat, there's guys who will watch the tablet from the TV view. I'm more big on like what does the sheet say, and then let me watch them warm up. Because I'm not going to see that view in the box from behind him, so that doesn't really do much for me. And half the time the center field camera's off angle anyway, so it's a lot. It doesn't give you the true movement.
Yeah, I've always advocated that first person information. I was never in love with when the preceding hitter gets up, makes out. Guys ask him, "What's he got? What's he got?" Well, that's his perception of what he's got. Like what you see is first person. What you're getting from him is now third person kind of stuff. And I've always thought that was information that you might not want to lean on, because if I'm the kind of guy who has difficulty with the breaking ball, I'm going to see every breaking ball like it's the greatest one I've ever seen in my life. And now you've got that in your head and you're walking up to the plate. Well, that's a recipe for failure, I think. So I really do think we could stand to have more guys watch what's going on and let your brain do what it does best, which is collect all that data and information far better than any computer does. But there are games I see where nobody's watching the game, literally.
But the only thing that I like to use it for is if we have a guy who the slider I think is interesting, because the slider is such an interesting pitch in baseball because there's so many different variations of it in my mind. Some guys have, you watch like Dylan Cease, he's got such a tight across and then down with his slider. But then so many guys, like when you face Seattle, so many guys come out of their bullpen and they throw like these frisbees that don't necessarily have any depth to them. They just go straight across. And so the only thing I like to see from the pitcher angle is like, what if a guy's got a slider, what is that doing? Do I see depth? Do I not see depth? Because that's going to determine. If I see more depth, then I can keep him more middle of the plate. If I see more sweep, I might have to push him out over the plate and get away from that inside corner, because anything that starts in is going to run in on me. So that like things like that I'll kind of take a look at. But yeah, no, I don't like. I think you can get in your own head too much about like watching it from that angle. And like you said, I also think some guys see movement really well, other guys don't see movement really well. So I've never, I'm with you. I've never been a big like, hey, what does this guy got? Because it's like, oh, it's running a bunch. So then you get up there and you take the first pitch because you're like, well, I want to see what this thing's doing before I swing at it. And he throws you a fastball right down the middle, and you're like, that moved like 2 inches, and now you're on one.
Right, and I think it's like having pitches called for you when you're a young player as a pitcher. It's the same sort of thing. Like, I want you to be self-reliant. I want you to discover for yourself what you could do. And also, I don't want to give you a crutch such that when I call the pitch for you, you now have a built-in excuse as to why that guy got a double on that, because that was the pitch that you called, not the pitch that I wanted. And I don't think there's any substitute, whether you're a hitter or a pitcher or you're a second baseman or a shortstop, than conviction. Knowing what you know and being able to respond in an instant without any hesitation, if you will. And the minute somebody's in your ear, there's got to be something that's lost between getting that information, processing it, and then applying it.
No, I could not agree more. I really couldn't.
Well, that's why we get along. So I know we got to wrap it up. You got to go. I can't thank you enough, man. This has been fabulous. You know, it warms my heart whenever I get to speak to somebody who's just knows so much about the game. It's something we need a lot more of, and we'll do this again. You just let me know when you get a free hour or so in the next month or two, and we'll do it. If you're going to be in New York, we'll have dinner. And please send my best to your father and to your family. Great people. I love them both. And I can't thank you enough, man, for stopping by. I love you.
No, absolutely, Tommy. I appreciate you having me on, and I love getting to talk to you. That summer in the Cape was one of my best baseball memories. Being able to one, be out there in that league and playing that, and then two, be around you and get to pick your big brain on infield play, on hitting, on situational stuff. And it still is one of the fondest memories that I have of playing. And so anytime we get a chance to catch up, it's something that I love to do. So I would love to be back on. And anytime you shoot me a text, I'll be on. So if I'm in New York, you're gonna have to take me to the best restaurant, and I'm sure we'll be there for a couple hours into the early morning hours as well. So again, thanks, Tom, and appreciate all you've done for me and for my career.
You bet. All right, pal. We'll speak soon. Thank you so much. Michael Massey. Thanks, kid.